Hey there, and welcome to True Stories of the Unseen Mind, where we share the real, personal stories of extraordinary people living with rare and misunderstood psychological conditions. Before we dive in, I invite you to get comfy, grab your favorite blanket, settle in, and make yourself at home. If you enjoy these stories, please remember to hit like and subscribe before you drift off or get too relaxed. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments below so we can see how far our community reaches. Now, let's journey together into the unseen corners of the mind. Tonight, we're exploring Cotard syndrome, sometimes called walking corpse syndrome. It is one of the rarest and most mysterious conditions in all of psychiatry. People with Cotard's experience a powerful delusion. They believe they are dead, don't exist, or have lost their organs or blood. It's a condition that challenges everything we think we know about consciousness and identity. Though it's rare, Cotard's has appeared in medical literature for over a century, and its stories are as haunting as they are deeply human. In this episode, you'll hear 6 true accounts of people who have lived through Cotard syndrome. Each story is unique, but all share one thing: a journey through the shadowy edges of the mind and, sometimes, a path back to life. Before we begin, a quick note about the stories you're about to hear. To respect the privacy and dignity of the people involved, names and some identifying details have been changed. In some cases, you'll hear pseudonyms or simple descriptors, like the Scottish man or the Japanese woman, instead of real names. This approach allows me to share these important stories while protecting the individuals and families at their heart. We'll begin with the haunting silence of Mademoiselle X. She was known to the world only as Mademoiselle X. The records never preserved her real name, just the fragments of a life that would echo through the annals of psychiatric history. Paris, 1880, a city of light. But for Mademoiselle X, the world had already grown dim. She had once been a woman of sharp wit and gentle laughter. Friends remembered her as lively, her eyes bright with curiosity. But over months, a shadow crept in. It began with a quiet withdrawal, a missed dinner, a letter unanswered, an empty seat at church. Family worried. But at first, the changes seemed like the ordinary ebb and flow of mood. Then, the silences grew longer. She stopped tending to her garden, let dust gather on her favorite books, and spent long hours staring out her window at the gray Parisian sky. When visitors called, she would not answer the door. When asked how she was, she simply said, "I am not." At first, her family thought it was melancholy, what we'd now call depression. But Mademoiselle X's darkness was stranger, deeper. She began to speak of her body as if it were a distant, broken thing. "My chest is empty," she once whispered to her sister. "There is no heart inside me. My blood is gone. I am hollow." Doctors were called. They examined her, puzzled by her conviction. She insisted she had no brain, no nerves, no stomach. "I am just a shell," she said, her voice barely audible. "A shell that cannot die because I am already dead." Her family tried to comfort her, to remind her of the simple pleasures that once gave her joy. But nothing seemed to reach her. Food lost all meaning. She would not eat, certain that her body no longer required sustenance. "Why feed a corpse?" she asked, her eyes wide and eerily calm. "I do not exist." The world outside continued. The city bustled, The seasons changed, friends married, and children were born. But for Mademoiselle X, time had stopped. She moved through her days like a ghost, untouched by warmth or sunlight. Her family, desperate, sought out every doctor and priest they could find. Some spoke of possession, others of madness. But no one had ever seen a case quite like this. It was Dr. Jules Cotard, a rising star in Parisian psychiatry, who finally gave her condition a name. He listened to her delusions with grave attention, documenting each phrase, each detail. In his notes, he wrote, "The negation of her own existence is absolute. She denies her body, her soul, her very being." Mademoiselle X's world had become a silent void. She stopped speaking altogether, retreating into a private realm of nothingness. Her family watched, helpless, as she faded, her body growing thin, her eyes distant. But beneath the silence, a storm raged. What must it feel like to believe so completely in your own non-existence? To look in the mirror and see not a person, but an absence? For Mademoiselle X, the pain was not physical, but existential, a suffering beyond language. As weeks turned to months, hope dwindled. Doctors tried every remedy known at the time: rest, tonics, prayer, even the new talking cure. Nothing could shake her conviction. "I am damned," she whispered once, the only words she'd spoken in days. Damned to wander in this emptiness, unable to die. Her family sat by her bedside, holding her hand, whispering stories of childhood, of laughter and light. But Mademoiselle X was already adrift, lost in the silent corridors of her mind, convinced she was a ghost among the living. The doctors who visited Mademoiselle X were baffled. Some whispered about melancholia, others about hysteria, a word often used in that era when the mind's mysteries outpaced medicine's answers. But none had seen a case so profound, so absolute in its denial of existence. Her days fell into a pattern of stillness. Morning light would seep through the curtains, dust motes swirling in the air, but she would not stir. Meals were left untouched on her bedside table, the scent of fresh bread and broth fading into the stale quiet. Her family pleaded with her, sometimes in hushed tones, sometimes with tears. "Please eat. Please come back to us." But she only gazed past them, as if they were shadows from another life. Occasionally, a flicker of awareness would return. She would look at her hands, turning them over, tracing the veins beneath her skin. "They are not my hands," she murmured once. "They belong to someone who is alive." Her sister tried to reassure her, placing her own hand atop Mademoiselle X's, hoping that touch might bridge the gap between worlds. But Mademoiselle X recoiled, as if contact with the living burned her. Dr. Cotard, determined to understand, spent hours at her bedside. He asked gentle questions, never pressing, always listening. "Do you feel pain?" he asked one morning. She shook her head. "Pain is for the living," she replied. "I feel only emptiness." He asked about her memories, her dreams, her fears. She answered each with the same haunting certainty. "I am nothing. I have no past, no future. I am already gone." He documented her words carefully, knowing he was witnessing something rare and profound. In his notes, he wrote, "A soul adrift, severed from the world by a delusion so complete, it erases the self." He wondered what had brought her to this place. Was it grief, trauma, some hidden wound of the mind? Or was it simply the mysterious workings of the brain, a puzzle with no solution? Outside life continued. Children played in the streets. Lovers strolled along the Seine. The city pulsed with energy. But inside the small apartment, time seemed to stand still. Mademoiselle X's family moved quietly, afraid to disturb the fragile peace. They spoke in whispers, their laughter muffled, as if mourning someone already lost. One evening, as dusk painted the city in shades of blue and gold, her mother sat by her side and sang a lullaby from childhood. The melody floated through the room, gentle and familiar. For a moment, Mademoiselle X closed her eyes, and a single tear traced down her cheek. But when the song ended, she opened her eyes and said softly, "Even music cannot reach the dead." Her body grew frailer with each passing week. The doctors warned her family that without nourishment, she would not survive. But Mademoiselle X refused every offer of food or drink. "I do not need it," she insisted. "There is nothing left to sustain." Her family was torn between hope and despair. Some clung to the belief that she might return, that one morning she would wake and remember who she was. Others began to prepare for loss, their grief a silent companion in the dim rooms of their home. Dr. Cotard visited daily, his presence a small comfort. He brought books, stories of resilience and recovery. But Mademoiselle X showed no interest. He tried new treatments, new words, searching for any sign of change. But the delusion was relentless, an unyielding force that held her captive. As winter approached, the city outside grew cold and gray. Frost crept along the windows, and the nights grew long. Inside, Mademoiselle X lay still, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on a point beyond the ceiling. Her family gathered around her, holding vigil in the quiet hours. They remembered the woman she had been, her laughter, her kindness, the way she once filled their home with warmth. Now, they could only watch as she slipped further away, lost in the haunting silence of her own mind. As the days slipped by, the world outside Mademoiselle X's window became a distant memory. The voices of street vendors, the clatter of carriage wheels, the laughter of children, all faded into the background, muffled by the walls of her quiet room. Inside, the air was thick with worry and the unspoken weight of hope slipping away. Her family, though exhausted, refused to abandon her. Her mother read aloud from favorite novels, her sister played gentle melodies on the old piano, and her father sat by her side, holding her hand in silence. Each act was a desperate attempt to reach her, to remind her of the life that still pulsed around her. But Mademoiselle X remained unmoved, her gaze fixed on a reality that no one else could see. Dr. Cotard, too, was changed by her presence. He found himself thinking of her long after he left her bedside, haunted by the profound sadness in her eyes. He consulted with colleagues, scoured medical texts, and even wrote letters to other doctors across Europe, searching for answers. But Cotard's syndrome, as it would come to be known, was a mystery that defied the science of the time. On one particularly cold morning, Dr. Cotard arrived to find Mademoiselle X sitting upright, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, spoke clearly. "Doctor, I have seen the other side. There is nothing there. I am only a shadow, waiting to dissolve." Her voice was calm, almost serene, as if she had come to accept her fate. He asked her gently, "Do you remember the warmth of the sun, the taste of bread, the sound of your mother's voice?" She shook her head. "Those things belong to the living. I am beyond them now." Yet, for a brief moment, her eyes seemed to search his, as if hoping for something, perhaps a reason to return. The family's grief deepened. Meals became quieter, laughter rarer. Friends who visited left with tears in their eyes, shaken by the transformation of a woman they once knew so well. Rumors began to circulate in the neighborhood. Some whispered that she was possessed, others that she was cursed. But those closest to her knew the truth. She was not haunted by spirits, but by an emptiness that no one could fill. As Mademoiselle X's body weakened, her delusions only grew stronger. She began to speak of damnation, of being trapped between worlds. "I cannot die," she told Dr. Cotard one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am already dead, but I remain. It is a punishment, I think, for something I cannot remember." Despite her conviction, her family clung to hope. They prayed for a miracle, for a sudden awakening, for the return of the woman they loved. But each day brought only further decline. Her hair thinned, her cheeks hollowed, and her once bright eyes faded to a distant gray. Dr. Cotard continued to visit, documenting every detail, every phrase. He believed that understanding her suffering might one day help others. In his journals, he wrote, "Her delusion is absolute, her suffering immense. Yet there is a dignity in her silence, a quiet resistance, even as she slips away." Winter gave way to early spring. The first green buds appeared on the trees outside her window, a reminder that life persisted even in the darkest times. But inside, the world of Mademoiselle X remained unchanged, a place of shadows and silence, untouched by the promise of renewal. Her family kept vigil, their love unwavering. They spoke to her of the future, of hope, of the possibility that she might one day wake from her living nightmare. But for Mademoiselle X, the journey back seemed impossibly far. Spring in Paris is usually a time of hope, a season when the city shakes off the chill of winter and life returns in bursts of color and song. But in the quiet apartment where Mademoiselle X lay, the world remained suspended in a hush that no birdsong could break. Her family moved through their routines with gentle care, afraid that the slightest disruption might shatter the fragile peace that hovered over her bedside. On some mornings, her mother would open the window just a crack, letting in a breath of fresh air and the distant scent of blooming lilacs. Mademoiselle X barely reacted, her gaze fixed on a place far beyond the room's four walls. She seemed to exist in a liminal space, part memory, part absence, her body present, but her spirit unreachable. Dr. Cotard, ever the observer and advocate, became more than just her physician. He was a witness to her suffering, a chronicler of her journey through the darkness. He often wrote in his journal after each visit, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with awe. What is the mind, he pondered, that it can erase itself so completely, yet leave the body behind? He tried, in his own way, to offer comfort. He spoke to her of the world outside, the river, the markets, the laughter of children in the square. He read her passages from poetry, hoping that the cadence of familiar words might stir something deep within. Sometimes he thought he saw the faintest flicker of recognition in her eyes, but it would vanish as quickly as it came. Her family, too, clung to rituals of love and remembrance. Her sister placed fresh flowers on the nightstand each morning. Her father hummed lullabies as he tidied the room. And her mother kept a candle burning through the night, a small flame of hope in the darkness. Every gesture was an act of faith, a reminder that Mademoiselle X was still loved, still part of the world, even if she could not feel it. Yet, the illness was relentless. Mademoiselle X's refusal to eat had left her frail and weak, her skin nearly translucent, her movements slow and deliberate. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her words were tinged with a strange calmness. "I am waiting," she said once, as her mother brushed her hair. Waiting for nothing, for the end that never comes. The doctors tried to intervene, urging nourishment, suggesting new treatments, even inviting priests to pray for her soul. But Mademoiselle X was unmoved. She had built a fortress of silence around herself, and nothing, no medicine, no prayer, no plea, could penetrate it. For her family, the hardest part was the not knowing. Was she suffering? Or had she found some measure of peace in her belief? Did she hear their voices, feel their touch, remember their love? Or was she already gone, lost to a world that only she could see? As the days grew longer and the city bloomed in the warmth of spring, the apartment remained a world apart. A place where time had stopped, where hope and sorrow mingled in the quiet air. Mademoiselle X, the woman who had once filled every room with laughter, now drifted between life and death, held in the delicate balance of a mind undone. And yet, even in her silence, she left an indelible mark. Her story, captured in the careful notes of Dr. Cotard, would echo through the years as a testament to the mysteries of the human mind. A reminder that sometimes the greatest struggles are the ones no one else can see. As the weeks slipped by, the line between day and night blurred in the apartment. Family members moved quietly, their lives revolving around the bedside of the woman they loved, each gesture infused with both hope and resignation. Outside, the city pulsed with new life. But inside, the air was still, heavy with the presence of someone who believed herself already gone. Mademoiselle X's body, starved of nourishment, grew more fragile with each passing day. Her cheeks hollowed, her skin pale as parchment, her voice a mere whisper. Yet her conviction remained unshaken. "I am not here," she told Dr. Cotard in what would be their final conversation, her eyes unfocused, as if seeing a world just beyond the reach of the living. "I am only the memory of a woman who once was." Her family, exhausted but determined, continued their gentle rituals. Fresh linens, cool water on her brow, whispered words of comfort. They spoke to her of the world outside, the scent of spring rain, the laughter of children, the promise of another summer. But Mademoiselle X remained unmoved, her mind anchored in a reality none could share. One evening, as dusk settled over Paris, her mother sat beside her, holding her hand in both of hers. She sang the old lullaby once more, her voice trembling with sorrow and love. For a fleeting moment, Mademoiselle X's eyes fluttered open, and she gazed at her mother with a clarity that had been absent for months. A single tear slid down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for remembering me." It was the last thing she ever said. In the days that followed, her body weakened further. She slipped into a quiet, peaceful sleep from which she did not awaken. Her passing was gentle, a final release from the shadowed world her mind had built. The family mourned her deeply, but they also remembered the woman she had been, vibrant, curious, full of laughter and kindness. In their grief, they found solace in the love they had shared, and in the knowledge that her suffering was over. Dr. Cotard, too, was changed by her story. He would go on to share her case with the world, giving a name to the strange, haunting delusion that had claimed her. In his writings, he honored her not only as a patient, but as a person, a soul who had journeyed to the farthest reaches of the mind, and whose story would help others understand the mysteries of existence. Mademoiselle X's legacy endures not just in medical textbooks, but in the hearts of those who remember her. Her story is a testament to the power and fragility of the human mind. A reminder that, even in the depths of despair, love and memory endure. And so, as the city outside bloomed with the promise of new beginnings, the story of Mademoiselle X became part of the unseen tapestry of lives shaped by the mind's mysteries. Her journey, though marked by silence and sorrow, continues to echo. A quiet voice in the vast, unseen corners of the human experience. As Mademoiselle X's story fades into the shadows of history, her struggle reminds us that the boundaries between life and death are not always clear, nor are they confined to one place or time. Now, let's cross continents and years to the rain-soaked streets of Scotland, where another soul found himself lost between worlds, searching for proof that he still belonged among the living. In 2008, the rain fell steadily against the windows of a small Glasgow flat, tracing silver lines across the glass. For most, it was just another gray afternoon in Scotland, a day to sip tea, to wait for the sun to break through heavy clouds. But for one young man, the world outside had lost all meaning. In his mind, the rain was no longer a sign of life, but a reminder that he was no longer part of it. He had once been a vibrant presence, quick to laugh, eager to explore the city's winding streets, a devoted son and loyal friend. But everything changed after the accident. It was a simple twist of fate. A slip on the icy pavement, a blow to the head, a brief blackout. He woke in the hospital, surrounded by worried faces and the sterile scent of disinfectant. The doctors assured him he would recover, that the swelling in his brain would subside, that the headaches and confusion would fade. But as the days passed and his body healed, something else began to unravel. He grew quiet, withdrawn. He stopped answering calls, stopped meeting friends at the pub, stopped planning for the future. His mother noticed first, the way he stared out the window for hours, unmoving, as if searching for something he couldn't name. It began with a whisper, a thought so quiet he almost missed it. I think I'm dead. At first, he dismissed it as a side effect of the medication, a lingering fog from the injury. But the feeling grew stronger, more insistent. He tried to ignore it, to force himself back into the routines of daily life. But the world felt distant, unreal. Food lost its taste, music its melody, conversations their meaning. One evening, as his mother prepared dinner, he turned to her with hollow eyes. "Mom," he said, "I don't think I'm here anymore. I think I died in the accident." She laughed nervously, brushing it off as a joke, but he didn't smile. "I'm serious," he insisted. "I'm dead. This is hell." His mother's concern deepened. She watched as he stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring for himself. He spoke less and less, his words clipped and monotone. When she pressed him, he explained, "I don't feel pain. I don't feel hunger. I don't feel anything. I'm just here. But I shouldn't be." Doctors were called. Psychiatrists visited the flat, asking gentle questions, performing tests, prescribing medications. Some suggested depression, others post-traumatic stress. Still others, a rare form of psychosis. But nothing seemed to reach him. The more they tried to convince him he was alive, the more convinced he became that he was not. He described the world as gray, muffled, drained of color. "It's like watching life through a foggy window," he told one doctor. "I see people moving, talking, laughing. But I'm not part of it. I'm just a shadow." He stopped responding to his name, stopped recognizing familiar faces. Even his own reflection became a stranger, a pale, hollow-eyed wraith staring back at him. His mother, desperate, tried everything she could think of. She cooked his favorite meals, played his favorite songs, showed him photos from happier times. But nothing broke through the barrier. He remained convinced that he was dead, that he was trapped in a kind of limbo, unable to move on. The days blurred together. He wandered the flat at night, unable to sleep, haunted by the certainty of his own non-existence. Sometimes he would sit in the dark, tracing the veins on his hands, trying to find a pulse. "There's nothing there," he would mutter over and over. Nothing at all. The weeks after the accident stretched on, each day blending into the next. His mother, once buoyed by the hope of his physical recovery, now found herself adrift in a sea of uncertainty. She watched as her son, her only child, became a stranger in his own home. His laughter was gone, replaced by a quiet that was almost reverent, as if he feared disturbing some invisible force. Doctors came and went, each offering new theories and treatments. Some prescribed medication, others recommended therapy. But the young man remained unmoved, his conviction unwavering. "You don't understand," he told one psychiatrist. "I know what I am. I'm not supposed to be here." He stopped showering, stopped changing his clothes, stopped caring for his appearance. "Why bother?" he would say, if pressed. "The dead don't need to look presentable." His mother did her best to maintain a sense of normalcy. But every attempt at routine, meals, chores, even simple conversation, felt like play acting in a world that had lost its script. At night, she would sometimes hear him pacing the hallway, his footsteps soft but restless. Once, she found him sitting on the floor of the bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. "I don't recognize myself," he whispered. "It's like looking at a photograph of someone who's gone." Friends tried to visit, but their presence only deepened his sense of isolation. He couldn't explain to them what he felt, couldn't find the words to describe the emptiness that had hollowed him out from the inside. Some drifted away, uncomfortable with the changes they saw. Others stayed, their loyalty a quiet comfort, even when he could barely acknowledge it. One day, his mother suggested a walk in the park, a small step toward the world outside. He agreed, surprising her. They moved slowly, the air crisp and damp, the city alive with the sounds of distant traffic and birdsong. But to him, it all seemed muted, as if he were watching life through thick glass. Children ran past, laughing, chasing after a stray football. He watched them, a faint smile flickering and then fading. "They're alive," he said quietly. "I remember what that felt like." At the urging of his doctors, he tried a support group for people recovering from brain injuries. The stories were varied. Some spoke of memory loss, others of anger, confusion, or fear. When it was his turn, he hesitated, then spoke. "I don't think I made it after the accident. I think I died, and this is something else." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the group like a heavy blanket. despite their best efforts. The professionals around him struggled to reach him. They explained the science, how trauma could disrupt the brain, how depression could alter perception, how healing was possible. But for him, these explanations felt hollow. "You can't fix what isn't there," he insisted. "You can't bring the dead back to life." His mother's heart ached with every passing day. She clung to hope, searching for any sign that her son might return to her. She cooked his favorite meals, left notes of encouragement on his pillow, played his childhood lullabies in the evenings. Sometimes, she caught a glimpse of the boy she remembered. A flash of humor, a spark of curiosity. But it would vanish as quickly as it appeared. The world outside continued to turn, indifferent to the struggles unfolding within their small flat. Seasons changed, holidays came and went, but the young man remained caught in his own private winter. A season of stillness and longing, where the promise of spring felt impossibly distant. There were moments, brief and fleeting, when the old world seemed to reach for him. A favorite song would play on the radio, and for a heartbeat, he'd hum along before catching himself, remembering he was not supposed to feel. Once, a neighbor's dog ran up and licked his hand, and he felt the faintest jolt of warmth, startling, almost frightening in its unfamiliarity. But these sparks of sensation faded quickly, swallowed by the gray fog that had become his reality. His mother continued her quiet campaign of hope. She'd open the curtains each morning, letting in the pale Scottish sunlight, and describe the world outside. The smell of fresh rain, the sight of daffodils blooming along the curb, the sound of distant church bells. Sometimes she'd sit beside him and tell stories from his childhood, her voice soft and steady, as if by weaving together memories, she could stitch him back into the fabric of life. But the young man remained adrift. He grew convinced that his presence was a burden, that his mother's love was wasted on someone who no longer existed. "You should let me go," he said one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. "You deserve someone who's alive." She refused to give up. She reached out to specialists in Edinburgh and London, searching for anyone who might help. Eventually, a psychiatrist with experience in rare delusional disorders agreed to see him. The doctor listened carefully as the young man described his conviction. "It's not sadness," he explained. "It's certainty. I know I'm dead. I just can't leave." The psychiatrist recognized the signs of Cotard syndrome, a diagnosis so rare that many doctors never encounter it in their careers. He explained the condition gently, describing how trauma and brain injury could cause the mind to lose its sense of self, to slip into a world where reality and delusion intertwine. "You're not alone," he assured the young man. "Others have felt this too, and some have found their way back." For the first time, the young man listened. The idea that his experience had a name, that it was something understood, if only a little, by others, planted a fragile seed of hope. The psychiatrist recommended a combination of medication and therapy, and more importantly, urged patience and compassion from his mother. The journey was far from over. There were setbacks, days when the fog felt impenetrable, when the belief in his own death seemed as real as the rain on the window. But there were also glimmers of change. He began to eat small meals again, to respond to questions with more than a single word, to notice, if only dimly, the world outside his window. His mother marked each tiny victory, a smile, a question, a request for tea as a miracle. She knew there would be no quick cure, no sudden awakening. But she clung to the belief that with time, her son might find his way back from the borderlands of existence. And in the quiet moments between dusk and dawn, as the city slept and the rain whispered against the glass, she would sit by his side, holding his hand, and remind him again and again that he was still loved, still seen, and perhaps still alive. The process of healing was neither quick nor linear. There were days when the young man felt the weight of non-existence pressing down on him so heavily that even breathing felt like an effort. On those mornings, he would pull the covers over his head and drift into a restless sleep, haunted by dreams in which he wandered empty streets, invisible to everyone around him. But there were also moments, small, almost imperceptible shifts, when something inside him stirred. He began to keep a journal at the psychiatrist's suggestion. At first, the pages were filled with numb observations. Hot toast. Didn't taste it. Rain again. But over time, his writing grew more curious, more questioning. Why do I still feel cold if I'm dead? Why does my mother's voice make me want to cry? Therapy sessions became a lifeline. The psychiatrist was patient, never dismissing the reality of what the young man felt. Instead, he encouraged him to explore the edges of his experience, to find places where the certainty of death softened, even if only for a moment. They talked about the accident, about memory and grief, about the strange ways the brain can deceive and protect. Sometimes, the young man left the office feeling lighter, as if the fog had thinned enough to let a sliver of light through. His mother noticed the changes first. He started to ask for small things, a cup of tea, a favorite sweater, a walk outside on a rare sunny day. She celebrated each request, no matter how mundane, as a victory. The routines they rebuilt together, setting the table, watering the plants, sharing quiet meals, became their own kind of therapy. Small rituals that tethered him to the present. One afternoon, as they walked along the River Clyde, he paused to watch a group of children feeding ducks. For the first time in months, he smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "I remember doing that," he said softly, "with Dad when I was little." His mother squeezed his hand, tears prickling at her eyes. It was just a memory, but it was also a sign, a thread connecting him to the world he thought he'd lost. Of course, there were setbacks. Some nights, the certainty of his own death would return, cold and absolute. He'd retreat into silence, his eyes distant, his presence fading. But each time, the darkness seemed to last a little less. The psychiatrist reminded him that recovery was a journey, not a destination, and that it was okay to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Slowly, color began to seep back into the world. He noticed the golden light at dusk, the warmth of a mug in his hands, the softness of his mother's hug. These sensations were small, but they were real. Proof, perhaps, that he was still here. He wasn't ready to say he believed he was alive. The conviction of death lingered at the edges of his mind, a shadow he might never fully escape. But he was learning to live with uncertainty, to hold both realities, the one his mind insisted on and the one his senses revealed, with a kind of tentative grace. And for his mother, that was enough. She saw the son she loved returning piece by piece from the borderlands of existence. Each day, she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the doctors, for the small victories, for the simple, miraculous fact of hope. The months continued to pass, and with each one, the distance between the young man and the world of the living grew a little smaller. Healing did not come in a dramatic rush. It arrived in quiet increments. A laugh at a joke on the television, a request to visit the corner shop, a tentative plan for the future. Each step was hard-won, but each was a victory. He began to reconnect with friends, first through text messages and short calls, then with cautious meetups at the cafe down the street. At first, he struggled to explain what he had been through. The language of death and non-existence was difficult for others to grasp, but his friends listened, offering patience and acceptance instead of easy answers. In therapy, he learned to challenge the certainty of his delusion, to question the voice that told him he was dead. Some days, the fog threatened to return, but he was better equipped to push back. If I can feel the warmth of my mother's hug, if I can taste my tea, if I can laugh until I cry, maybe, just maybe, I'm still here. His mother watched this transformation with a mix of awe and relief. She had feared she might lose him forever to the shadowlands of his mind. But now, she saw glimpses of the son she remembered. Curious, gentle, alive. Together, they built new routines, new memories, each one a thread that bound him more tightly to the present. He never forgot the darkness he had endured. Some nights, he would sit by his bedroom window, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass and remember what it felt like to be lost between worlds. But now, those memories served as a reminder of how far he had come and of the strength it took to return. For the rest of his life, he carried the scars of his journey, but he also carried a deep empathy for others who struggled with the unseen battles of the mind. He became an advocate for mental health, sharing his story with those who felt alone in their suffering, offering hope where once there had been only silence. The world outside his window was no longer gray and distant. It was vibrant, unpredictable, and, most importantly, real. And as he walked the streets of Glasgow, the rain on his face and the city alive around him, he knew, at last, that he belonged to the world of the living. In the quiet hush after a storm, we leave behind the Scottish man's lonely vigil and turn toward a distant land, Japan, where an aging grandmother's silence carried its own kind of sorrow. Let's journey now to a home filled with cherry blossoms and gentle rituals, and witness how Cotard syndrome transformed the heart of a family. We have the story of the Japanese woman who believed she was already gone. In 2014, in a quiet suburb outside Tokyo, the gentle rhythm of daily life continued. Buses arriving on schedule, neighbors exchanging bows, the distant chime of a school bell. But for one family, the ordinary routines had been upended by an invisible force that slowly, inexorably, pulled their loved one away. She was a 69-year-old grandmother, known for her warmth and her gentle humor. Her home was always filled with the scent of simmering miso and the laughter of grandchildren. She tended her garden with care, coaxing delicate cherry blossoms to bloom each spring. Her life, though simple, was rich with meaning and connection. But as the seasons turned, her family began to notice subtle changes. She grew quieter, more withdrawn. Meals were left unfinished, chores forgotten. She spent long hours gazing out the window, her eyes searching the sky as if for an answer only she could see. At first, her children thought it was the sadness that sometimes comes with age, a melancholy that would pass with time. But her silence deepened. She stopped laughing at her grandchildren's jokes. stopped calling her friends, stopped tending her beloved flowers. When asked if she was feeling well, she would only shake her head and look away. One morning, her daughter found her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded in her lap, her tea untouched. "I am already gone," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. "There is nothing left inside me." Her daughter, alarmed, tried to comfort her, but the words seemed to drift past, unheard. As the days passed, her conviction grew stronger. She insisted her organs were rotting, that her body was just an empty shell. She refused to eat, explaining that corpses had no need for food. She stopped speaking, retreating further into silence with each passing day. Her family watched in anguish as the woman they loved faded before their eyes. They brought her to doctors who ran tests and prescribed medications. Some suspected depression, others dementia. But none could explain the certainty with which she spoke of her own non-existence. Eventually, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, her family desperate for answers. There, a team of clinicians listened carefully to her story. Through gentle questions and patient observation, they recognized the signs of Cotard syndrome, a rare and bewildering delusion that convinced her she was already dead. Inside the hospital, her world shrank to the size of her room. She spent her days staring at the ceiling, her nights haunted by dreams of emptiness and decay. When nurses brought her meals, she turned away. When her family visited, she barely acknowledged them, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond their reach. But even as she slipped further away, her family refused to give up hope. They brought her photographs from home, played her favorite songs, and spoke of the life that waited for her outside. Each gesture was a thread, a fragile connection to the world she had left behind. The hospital was a world apart from the life she had once known. The days moved slowly, marked by the quiet shuffle of nurses' feet and the low hum of distant conversation. In her small room, she lay beneath crisp white sheets, her hands folded neatly on her stomach, her eyes tracing patterns in the ceiling tiles. Her family visited as often as they could, bringing with them the familiar comforts of home: a favorite scarf, a small vase of cherry blossoms, a handwritten letter from her youngest grandson. Her daughter would sit by her bedside, reading aloud from old family albums, her voice steady even as her heart ached. Sometimes, her mother would close her eyes, as if listening to a distant memory. But when the story ended, she would turn away, her silence deeper than before. The doctors and nurses approached her with gentle patience. They spoke in soft voices, careful not to startle or overwhelm. Each day they encouraged her to eat, to walk, to speak. But she refused, her conviction unyielding. "I am a corpse," she told them, her voice flat and certain. "There is nothing left to nourish." The medical team met regularly to discuss her care. They reviewed her history, her symptoms, the progression of her beliefs. Some wondered if a lifetime of quiet endurance had left her vulnerable to this strange delusion. Others saw in her case a mystery that defied easy explanation, a mind so powerful it could erase itself from its own story. Therapy sessions became part of her daily routine. The psychiatrist, a kind woman with a gentle manner, would sit beside her, asking simple questions. What do you remember about your childhood? What makes you happy? Do you remember the sound of your grandchildren's laughter? At first, the woman answered only with silence or a slow shake of her head. But over time, she began to share fragments. Memories of summer festivals, the taste of sweet red bean cakes, the feeling of sunlight on her face as a child. Her family clung to these moments, no matter how brief. They saw in them a glimmer of the woman they loved, a sign that somewhere beneath the layers of silence and certainty, she was still there. There were setbacks, too. Some days, her delusions grew stronger. She insisted her body was decaying, that her breath was the wind passing through an empty shell. She asked her daughter to stop visiting, explaining with heartbreaking clarity, "It is not right for the living to mourn the dead while she still walks among them." But her family refused to give up. They brought her favorite foods, even though she would not eat. They played recordings of her grandchildren's laughter, hoping the sound might reach her where words could not. Each act was a gesture of love, a reminder that, even in the face of the deepest silence, connection endures. As weeks passed, the medical team adjusted her treatment. New medications were tried, and her therapy sessions grew longer, more focused on the present, on the feel of the sun through the window, the scent of fresh flowers, the warmth of a loved one's hand. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the woman began to respond. She accepted sips of tea from her daughter, allowed the nurses to help her sit up in bed, listened quietly to the sounds of the world outside her window. Each small step was celebrated by her family, a fragile hope blooming in the quiet hospital room. The days in the hospital moved in slow, gentle cycles. Each morning, a nurse would quietly open the curtains, letting sunlight filter onto the crisp sheets. The woman would turn her head, watching the play of light and shadow across the room, but her expression remained distant, her mind still wandering somewhere far away. Her daughter visited faithfully, always bringing something from home. A photo of the family at a summer festival, a small origami crane folded by her grandson, a favorite scarf in soft blue. She would sit by the bed and talk about the weather, the garden, the antics of the grandchildren. Sometimes, the woman would close her eyes, listening intently, and her daughter would hope that, just for a moment, her mother was truly present. Therapy continued, with the psychiatrist gently encouraging her to share her thoughts. The woman's answers were often brief, her voice soft and matter-of-fact. "I am not suffering," she would say. "I am simply not here." When asked about her body, she described a sensation of emptiness, as if her organs were fading away. "There is nothing inside me. I am like a shadow." These words were difficult for her family to hear, but the medical team understood the power of her conviction. They focused on small, tangible experiences. Holding a warm cup of tea, feeling the cool breeze from an open window, listening to the temple bells in the distance. The psychiatrist encouraged her to describe these sensations, to notice them even if she believed they belonged to someone else. Some days, there were glimmers of connection. The woman would accept a spoonful of soup or allow her daughter to brush her hair. She would watch the cherry blossoms outside her window, her gaze lingering on the drifting petals. Once, as her daughter told a story from childhood, the woman smiled faintly, a fleeting expression, but one her daughter treasured. But there were also setbacks. On difficult days, the woman withdrew again, speaking only to say she was already dead, that her family should not waste their love on a corpse. Her daughter would hold her hand and quietly refuse to let go, whispering, "You are still here, Mama. We are here with you." The hospital staff supported the family, reminding them that recovery from Cotard syndrome could be slow and uneven. progress was measured in the smallest of victories. A shared memory, a gentle touch, a moment of laughter. Each was a thread, weaving the woman back into the fabric of life, one fragile strand at a time. And so the days passed, marked by patience, hope, and the enduring love of a family unwilling to let go. Even in her silence, the woman's presence was felt. A quiet reminder that the bonds of family and memory can reach across even the deepest distances of the mind. Spring deepened outside the hospital, and the cherry blossoms, once a symbol of renewal, began to fall in gentle drifts. The woman would sometimes watch the petals through her window, her eyes following their slow descent, her face unreadable. Her daughter continued to visit, bringing small gifts and stories from home, her presence a quiet anchor in the shifting tides of her mother's mind. There were days of progress. Days when the woman would accept a few spoonfuls of rice or allow her daughter to braid her hair. She listened to the laughter of her grandchildren on a recording, and for a fleeting moment, her lips curved in a faint smile. These moments, though brief, were treasured by her family and the hospital staff alike. Each was a sign that the threads of connection, though fragile, still held. Therapy sessions became more focused on the present. The psychiatrist encouraged her to describe what she could see, hear, and feel. What color are the flowers today? Can you feel the warmth of the sun on your hands? At first, the woman answered softly, mechanically. But over time, her responses grew more thoughtful. She began to notice the scent of incense, the softness of her favorite scarf, the gentle weight of her daughter's hand in hers. Still, the delusion lingered. There were mornings when she refused to speak, insisting again that she was already dead, that her family should not mourn her. On those days, her daughter would simply sit beside her, holding her hand in silence, her presence both a comfort and a quiet defiance of the darkness. The hospital team celebrated every small victory. A shared laugh, a completed meal, a memory recalled. Each was a step, however tentative, back toward life. The woman's journey was slow, marked by setbacks and uncertainty, but it was also marked by love. The steadfast devotion of her family, the patience of her caregivers, the gentle persistence of hope. One afternoon, as the sun set and the sky blushed with the colors of spring, her daughter found her gazing out the window. "The blossoms are falling," the woman said, her voice soft but clear. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" Her daughter nodded, tears shining in her eyes. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental, a sign that perhaps the world was beginning to reach her once more. The cherry blossoms had all but vanished from the branches outside her window, their petals now a soft carpet on the hospital grounds. The woman watched them sometimes, her gaze lingering on the delicate pink, a faint reminder of seasons past and the quiet beauty of renewal. Inside, the rhythm of her days began to shift. There were more mornings when she accepted tea, more afternoons when she listened to her daughter's stories, sometimes even asking a gentle question or recalling a memory. The hospital staff noticed the difference. A new lightness in her step, a willingness to participate in small routines. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but rather a slow reawakening, like the gradual return of spring after a long winter. Her daughter, ever patient, marked each milestone. A shared meal, a quiet laugh, a whispered thank you. She knew that the delusion might never fully disappear, that her mother's sense of non-existence could return with the changing weather or difficult memory. Still, She cherished every sign of life, every moment of connection. Therapy continued, focusing on the present, on sensation, on family, on the world outside the window. The woman learned to describe what she saw and felt, to anchor herself in reality even as her mind sometimes drifted. The psychiatrist reminded her, gently and often, that she was not alone, that her family, her caregivers, and even strangers far away were rooting for her return. On the day she was discharged, the air was warm and fragrant with the promise of summer. Her family gathered around her, helping her into a favorite dress, wrapping her in a soft shawl. As they left the hospital, she paused for a moment at the door, looking back at the place where she'd spent so many silent days. She took a deep breath, feeling the sun on her face, and for the first time in months, she smiled. Small, but real. The journey home was quiet, filled with the gentle comfort of familiar streets and the anticipation of returning to her garden. There would still be difficult days, moments when the shadows crept in and the sense of emptiness returned. But there would also be laughter, shared meals, the scent of flowers, and the unwavering love of her family. Her story became one of resilience, a reminder that even when the mind wanders far from the world, the bonds of love, patience, and gentle care can help guide it home. And in the quiet corners of her memory, where cherry blossoms fall and laughter echoes, she found her way back to herself, one small step at a time. As petals fall and new seasons begin, we say goodbye to the quiet strength of a grandmother and find ourselves in 2013, inside the restless world of an American teenager. Here, the boundaries between self and shadow blur in a different way, and the struggle to feel alive takes on a new, youthful urgency. She was just 16 when the world she knew began to slip away. Once, her days had been filled with the ordinary rhythms of adolescence: school bells, whispered secrets, the glow of a phone screen late at night. She was quiet, a little shy, but fiercely creative. Her notebooks overflowed with sketches and stories, dreams of places she hoped to visit one day. But then, a darkness crept in. It started as a heaviness, a slow erosion of joy. She lost interest in drawing, stopped texting her friends, let her grades slip. Her parents noticed the change, but at first, they chalked it up to the turbulence of growing up. "It's just a phase," they told themselves. "She'll bounce back." The sadness deepened, turning into something heavier, something that pressed on her chest and made every morning feel impossible. She stopped eating, slept through the afternoons, and spent long hours staring at the ceiling, lost in thoughts she couldn't name. Her parents grew more worried, reaching out to counselors and doctors. Diagnoses were made: depression, anxiety, but the treatments seemed to do little. The world grew grayer, more distant. Then, one evening, she startled her mother with a question that chilled her to the bone. "Mom, am I dead?" Her mother, caught off guard, tried to reassure her, but the girl shook her head. "I don't feel anything. I don't think I'm here anymore." The days that followed were a blur of confusion and fear. The girl became convinced that her blood had turned to ink, that her organs had stopped working, that she was just a shell. She stopped responding to her name, stopped recognizing her own reflection in the mirror. "I think I died," she whispered one night. "I think I need to go to the morgue so I can be with the other dead people." Her parents, terrified, brought her to the hospital. Doctors listened to her story, ran tests, and tried to explain that she was alive, that her heart was beating, that her body was whole. But the girl remained unconvinced. "You don't understand," she told them, her voice flat and distant. "I'm not supposed to be here." She was admitted to a psychiatric unit, her days now marked by the sterile routines of hospital life. Nurses brought her meals, but she rarely ate. Therapists visited, asking gentle questions, but she answered only in whispers. Her parents visited every day, bringing drawings from her childhood, her favorite music, anything that might remind her of the world she'd left behind. But the delusion was relentless. She insisted she was dead, that nothing anyone did could change that fact. She asked to be taken to the morgue, growing agitated when her requests were denied. The staff watched her with a mix of sadness and determination, searching for a way to reach her through the fog. The hospital became her new world, a place of white walls, gentle voices, and the persistent hum of fluorescent lights. Nurses moved quietly through the halls, doctors spoke in low tones, and her parents hovered anxiously nearby, searching her face for any sign of the daughter they remembered. Each day, therapists visited, encouraging her to talk, to draw, to express what she was feeling. Sometimes she would pick up a pencil and sketch. But her drawings were different now. Dark, abstract shapes, shadowy figures with hollow eyes. When asked what they meant, she'd shrug. "It's just what I see," she'd say, her voice flat. Meals were placed in front of her, but she rarely touched them. "I don't need to eat," she explained. "Dead people don't get hungry." The staff monitored her closely, aware of how quickly her body was weakening. Her parents tried to tempt her with favorite foods from home, mac and cheese, chocolate chip cookies. But nothing seemed to break through the wall of her conviction. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the hospital. Sometimes she'd hear the soft footsteps of the night nurse, or the beep of a monitor in another room, and wonder if anyone else felt as empty as she did. She missed her old life, the noise of the school cafeteria, the warmth of her mother's hug, the comfort of her own bed. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. Her parents visited every day, bringing photos, music, and little reminders of home. They played her favorite songs, hoping the melodies would reach her where words could not. Her mother would sit by her bed and read aloud from her favorite childhood stories, her voice trembling with hope and sorrow. Sometimes, the girl would close her eyes and listen. And for a moment, her breathing would slow, her face relaxing into something almost peaceful. The doctors tried different medications, adjusting doses and combinations in search of anything that might help. Therapy sessions continued, focusing on grounding techniques, helping her notice the feel of the blanket, the sound of her father's voice, the taste of cold water. The goal was to anchor her in the present, to remind her that she was still here, still alive. But the delusion remained. She would insist again and again that she was dead. "I shouldn't be here," she'd whisper. "I think I'm just waiting for someone to notice and send me where I belong." Her parents refused to give up. They spoke to her with unwavering love, reminding her of all the reasons she mattered, of the life waiting for her outside the hospital walls. They promised to stay by her side, no matter how long it took, no matter how lost she felt. And in the quiet moments between visits, the girl clung to those words, sometimes as a lifeline, sometimes as a distant echo in the darkness. The journey back to herself had only just begun. The days in the psychiatric unit unfolded with a quiet sameness, marked by the gentle routines of care and the steadfast presence of her parents. The girl's world remained muted, as if a pane of glass separated her from the color and warmth of ordinary life. She moved through her days like a ghost, her voice rarely rising above a whisper. Therapists tried new approaches, encouraging her to draw, to write, to find any way to express the emptiness inside. Sometimes, she would sketch images of herself as a shadow, surrounded by faceless figures, or write short notes that read, "Still not here," or "No heartbeat." Her parents would sit by her side, holding her hand, reading her favorite stories, and playing gentle music, each small act a reminder that she was not alone. There were moments, though, when the fog seemed to thin. One afternoon, her mother brought in a photo album filled with pictures from happier times. Birthday parties, beach trips, friends crowded together in the summer sun. The girl studied the images, her brow furrowed, and for a moment, her eyes filled with tears. "I remember this," she said softly, tracing her finger over a picture of herself and her best friend. "But it feels like it happened to someone else." Encouraged by this flicker of connection, the therapy team began to focus on grounding her in the present. They asked her to describe the feeling of the blanket on her lap, the taste of juice on her tongue, the sound of her father's voice. At first, she answered mechanically, but slowly, her responses grew more thoughtful. "It's soft," she said one morning, running her fingers over the fabric. "I guess I can feel that." Her parents celebrated every small victory. A smile, a question, a moment of eye contact. They marked each one as proof that their daughter was still fighting her way back. The girl, too, began to notice these moments. She started to ask for her sketchbook, to listen to music, to watch the rain through the window. The certainty that she was dead still lingered, but now it was joined by something else, a faint, persistent hope. Some nights, the darkness returned with full force. She would lie awake, convinced that she didn't belong in the world, that she was just waiting for someone to realize the truth. But even then, her parents were there, sitting quietly, holding her hand, whispering that they loved her, that she mattered, that she was still here. And in the gentle persistence of their love, the girl began to sense the possibility of coming back to life. Not all at once, but in small, steady steps, each one a little closer to the world she thought she'd lost. Spring slowly arrived outside the hospital, sunlight streaming through the windows and casting warm, golden patterns on the floors. Inside, the girl's world remained cautious and quiet, but change was beginning to take root. The therapy team, noticing her growing awareness of her senses, gently encouraged her to take more active steps toward the present. They invited her to join small group activities, painting, listening to music, even planting seeds in small pots by the window. At first, she hesitated, watching from the sidelines, unsure if she belonged. But one afternoon, as her mother sat beside her, she dipped her brush into blue paint and began to fill a blank canvas with swirling shapes. Her first burst of color in months. Her parents noticed the shift. She started to ask for her sketchbook more often, sometimes drawing images of the hospital garden or her family. She even smiled shyly when a nurse complimented her artwork. The certainty that she was dead still lingered, but now it was interrupted by moments of curiosity, even joy. "Maybe I'm not all the way gone," she admitted one day, tracing her finger along a line of fresh green sprouts in the window pot. Therapy sessions became more conversational. The therapists encouraged her to talk about her hopes, her fears, and the small things she missed about her old life. She spoke of wanting to walk her dog again, to feel the sun on her face, to laugh with her friends. Each wish was a thread, slowly weaving her back into the world of the living. There were setbacks, of course. Nights when the old conviction returned, when she felt herself drifting away from everyone around her. But her parents and the hospital staff remained steady, reminding her gently that she was safe, that she was loved, that she was still here. One evening, as her father read to her from her favorite childhood book, she reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. It was a small gesture, but for her family, it was everything. A sign that their daughter was finding her way back, one heartbeat at a time. And as the sun set outside her window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the girl closed her eyes and allowed herself, for the first time in a long while, to imagine a tomorrow. As spring turned to summer, the world outside the hospital grew brighter and more alive. Inside, the girl's recovery continued. Slow, uneven, but unmistakable. Each day brought small victories, a shared laugh with a nurse, a new sketch pinned to the wall, a request to call a friend from home. Her parents watched these moments with cautious joy, grateful for every sign that their daughter was returning to herself. Therapy sessions now focused on the future. The team encouraged her to imagine life beyond the hospital, returning to school, seeing her friends, walking her dog in the park. At first, these ideas felt distant, almost unreal. But gradually, hope began to take root. She started to talk about things she wanted to do, places she wanted to visit, stories she wanted to finish writing. The certainty that she was dead no longer dominated every thought. It lingered, sometimes returning in moments of stress or fatigue. But now, it was just one voice among many. With each passing week, her sense of self grew stronger. She learned to recognize the signs of her delusion and, with the support of her therapists and family, to gently challenge them. "I feel my heart beating," she would remind herself. "I can taste my food. I am still here." On the day she was discharged, the air was warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers. Her parents held her close, tears in their eyes, as they walked out of the hospital together. The journey home was quiet, filled with the gentle comfort of familiar sights and the knowledge that healing was possible. Back in her own room, surrounded by her art supplies and the soft glow of evening light, the girl sat at her desk and began to draw. This time, her lines were bold and bright. Images of herself with her family, her friends, her dog. She drew the world as she wanted to see it. Alive, full of color and possibility. There would still be hard days ahead. Moments when the shadows crept in and the old fears returned. But now, she faced them with the strength of someone who had found her way back from the edge. Her story became one of resilience, a reminder that even when the mind wanders far from the world, love, patience, and gentle care can help guide it home. And as the sun set outside her window, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, she allowed herself to believe, if only for a moment, that she truly belonged to the world of the living. From the uncertainty of adolescence, our journey leads us across the world to India, where the rhythms of family and tradition are interrupted by a father's quiet conviction that he no longer with us. Let's step into a home filled with incense and prayer and witness another family's devotion in the face of the unseen mind. In 2017, in a bustling city in India, where life spilled into the streets in a riot of color and sound, A quiet crisis unfolded behind the walls of a modest family home. The man at the center of it was 45 years old, a father, a husband, a neighbor known for his gentle humor and steady presence. Yet, to those who loved him, he had become a stranger, lost in a world that no one else could see. It started with silence. Once quick to join in conversation, he began to withdraw, spending long hours alone in his room. He stopped going to work, stopped eating meals with his family, stopped laughing at the jokes that once brought him joy. His wife was the first to notice the change, her concern growing as the days passed without explanation. Then the words came, quiet at first, then insistent. "I am dead," he told his wife one morning, his eyes hollow. "My heart has stopped. There's nothing left inside me." She tried to reassure him, to coax him back to the routines of daily life. But he only shook his head. "You must take me to the cremation ground," he said. "It's where I belong." His family was bewildered and afraid. They pleaded with him to eat, to bathe, to speak with friends and relatives. But he refused, convinced that his body no longer required food, that his soul had already departed. "I am just a shell," he explained, his voice flat and distant. "I am only waiting for the end." The local doctor was called, then a psychiatrist. They listened to his story, examined him carefully, and spoke with his family about the strange conviction that had overtaken him. The diagnosis was rare. Cotard syndrome, a delusion so profound that it erased the boundary between life and death. Inside the home, the atmosphere was tense with worry. His children watched him with wide, uncertain eyes. His wife moved through the days in a fog of exhaustion and fear. Meals went uneaten, laughter faded, and the routines that once anchored the family slipped away. Yet, even in the midst of despair, there were moments of connection. His wife would sit with him in the evenings, her hand resting gently on his, telling stories from their early years together. Sometimes he would listen, his eyes softening, a flicker of memory passing across his face. But when the story ended, the silence would return, heavy and absolute. The family reached out to spiritual leaders, hoping that prayer or ritual might break the spell. Incense was burned, blessings were given, but the man's conviction remained unshaken. "I am not here," he insisted. "I am only waiting to be released." The days in the family home grew quieter, the air heavy with worry and uncertainty. His wife moved through her routines with a kind of careful reverence, afraid that any sudden change might disturb the fragile peace. She tried to coax him to eat, to join the family for prayers, to step outside into the sunlit courtyard. But he remained unmoved, sitting for hours in silence, his eyes fixed on something distant and unseen. His children watched from the doorway, whispering questions to their mother. "Why doesn't Papa talk to us? Why does he say he's not here?" She could only shake her head, her heart aching with helplessness. The rituals that once brought the family together, shared meals, evening prayers, stories told under the soft glow of lanterns, now felt hollow, echoes of a life slipping away. The psychiatrist visited regularly, bringing gentle questions and a notebook filled with observations. He listened as the man described his certainty. "My heart doesn't beat. My body is cold. I'm only waiting for you to take me to the cremation ground." The doctor explained that his mind was playing tricks on him, that his body was alive and well. But the man only shook his head. "You cannot bring the dead back," he insisted. Treatment began, a careful combination of medication and therapy, designed to ease the delusion's grip. The doctor encouraged the family to remain patient, to offer love and reassurance, even when it seemed futile. Recovery will be slow, he warned, but it is possible. There were small signs of hope. On some mornings, the man would accept a cup of tea from his wife, sipping quietly as she sat beside him. He allowed his children to sit near him as they did their homework, their presence a faint reminder of the world he once inhabited. Sometimes, he would listen as his wife told stories from their early days together, her voice weaving memories of laughter, festivals, and long walks under the banyan trees. Yet, the belief in his own death lingered. When asked about the future, he would only say, "There is no future for someone who is already gone." The family's grief deepened, but so did their resolve. They continued to surround him with care, their love a constant presence in the quiet rooms of their home. Outside, the city moved on. Vendors calling out their wares, children playing in the streets, the scent of spices drifting through open windows. But inside, time seemed to pause, the family waiting and hoping for the man they loved to find his way back from the edge. Weeks passed in a haze of repetition and uncertainty. The man's world remained small, his bedroom, the shaded veranda, the quiet corners of the house where he sat in silence. His wife continued her gentle rituals, lighting incense in the mornings, placing fresh flowers by his bedside, reading aloud from sacred texts in the hope that some familiar verse might reach him. Some days, he seemed almost present. He would listen to his children's chatter as they played nearby, or nod in recognition when a neighbor stopped by to check in. Once, at his wife's urging, he joined the family for evening prayers. He sat quietly, his hands folded, his eyes closed, not in devotion, but in resignation. "I am only a witness," he said afterward. "I am not part of this world." The psychiatrist encouraged the family to keep including him, to treat him as though he were still fully there, even when his words suggested otherwise. Therapy sessions were gentle, focusing on the senses, the warmth of sunlight on his skin, the taste of sweet chai, the sound of his daughter's laughter. The doctor hoped these small anchors to the present might help loosen the grip of his delusion. There were glimmers of hope. On certain afternoons, he would accept a piece of fruit or sip tea without protest. He allowed his wife to brush his hair, to sit beside him in silence, to hold his hand as they watched the world go by from the veranda. These moments, though fleeting, filled the house with a sense of possibility, a quiet reminder that the man they loved was not completely lost. But the shadows remained. At night, he would sometimes whisper to his wife, "I am waiting for release. Please do not grieve. This is not my life anymore." She would squeeze his hand, fighting back tears, and remind him softly, "You are still here with us. We need you." The city outside moved on, oblivious to the struggle within the home. Festivals came and went, the streets filled with music and laughter. But for the family, every day was a test of patience and hope. They clung to small victories, believing that even the faintest sign of life was worth celebrating. And so, in the quiet of their home, surrounded by love and memory, the man's journey continued. A slow, uncertain path between the world of the living and the shadowlands of his mind. The slow march of days continued, marked by the gentle rituals of family life and the quiet persistence of hope. The man's wife clung to every small sign of progress, a nod, a whispered word, the acceptance of a meal. She became an expert in patience, learning to celebrate even the smallest victories while bracing herself for setbacks. Therapy sessions with a psychiatrist became a regular part of his week. The doctor encouraged him to talk about memories, festivals with his children, the taste of mangoes in summer, the feeling of monsoon rain on his face. At first, the man spoke only in fragments, insisting, "Those things happened to someone else. I am not that man anymore." But as the weeks passed, his stories grew longer. He described the laughter of his children, the scent of incense during Diwali, the comfort of his wife's hand in his. Each memory was a thread, stitching him slowly back into the fabric of his own life. His wife and children continued to surround him with love. They sat with him in the evenings, sharing stories and songs, inviting him to join in prayers and family meals. Sometimes he would reach out and take his wife's hand, holding it for a moment before letting go. Other times, he would sit quietly, listening to the sounds of their voices, his expression softening as he watched his children play. Outside, the city moved forward. Wedding processions winding through the streets, the air filled with the scent of spices and flowers. Inside, the family's world remained small, but it was beginning to feel less lonely. There were setbacks, of course. Days when the man's conviction returned with force, when he insisted again that he was dead, that he needed to be taken to the cremation ground. But those days grew less frequent, and his time among the living slowly increased. The psychiatrist reminded the family that healing was rarely a straight line. "There will be good days and bad," he said gently. "But every day you spend together is a day reclaimed from the darkness." The family took his words to heart, holding on to hope as tightly as they held on to each other. And so, in the warmth of their home, surrounded by love, the man's journey continued. A slow, uncertain return from the edge, guided by memory, patience, and the quiet, steadfast devotion of those who refused to let him go. As the months passed, the rhythm of life in the family home gradually began to return. The man's belief in his own death, once absolute, started to loosen its grip. There were more mornings when he accepted his wife's tea with a faint smile. More evenings when he joined his children as they studied or listened to stories. Each small act was a quiet victory, a sign that the world of the living was pulling him back, one gentle thread at a time. Therapy and medication continued, the psychiatrist guiding both the man and his family through the slow process of healing. There were still setbacks, days when the old conviction resurfaced, when he withdrew into silence and insisted he was only waiting to be released. But those days became less frequent, and the moments of connection grew. His wife marked every milestone. The first time he laughed at a family joke, the afternoon he helped his son water the garden, the evening he participated in prayers without prompting. She knew recovery was not a straight path, but each step forward was a testament to hope and the enduring power of love. One evening, as the monsoon rains fell outside, the family gathered for dinner. The man reached for a piece of roti, breaking it and sharing it with his youngest daughter. He looked around the table at the faces of those who had never given up on him. And for the first time in many months, he felt a flicker of belonging. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice steady, "for waiting for me." His journey was far from over. There would always be days when the shadows crept in, when the sense of emptiness threatened to return. But now, he faced them with the knowledge that he was not alone, that his family, his doctors, and his own resilience could guide him back from the edge. His story became one of quiet perseverance, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, the bonds of family and the gentle persistence of care can help bring someone home. And as the rains washed the city clean, the man found himself once again part of the world, his presence a quiet echo of hope for all who knew his story. As the monsoon rains fall and hope rekindles, we leave behind one family's vigil and travel to a quiet village in the Philippines. Here, an elderly woman's plea for her own funeral echoes the universal longing for peace and the power of love to call us back from the edge. In 2012, in a quiet village nestled among the rice fields of the Philippines, life moved to the gentle rhythm of sunrise and sunset. Neighbors greeted each other by name, children played beneath the mango trees, and families gathered each evening for shared meals and stories. For 76-year-old Lola Maria, these rituals had shaped a lifetime, a tapestry of love, hard work, and community. But everything changed after the stroke. It came suddenly, a shadow that swept over her one humid afternoon, leaving her speechless and unable to move one side of her body. The family rushed her to the hospital, prayers whispered as they waited for signs of hope. In time, her speech returned, and she learned to walk again with the help of her daughter's steady arm. But something deeper had shifted, something that medicine alone could not mend. At first, the signs were subtle. Lola Maria sat quietly at family gatherings, her laughter missing from the chorus of voices. She stopped tending her beloved garden, letting weeds creep over the rows of eggplants and okra. When her grandchildren visited, she watched them with distant eyes, as if she was seeing them from far away. Then, one morning, she made a chilling request. "Please," she told her daughter, her voice low and urgent, "it's time for my funeral. I am already dead." At first, her family tried to reassure her, thinking it was confusion or a bad dream. But Lola Maria would not be comforted. She insisted her heart had stopped, that her body was rotting from the inside, that she could even smell her own decay. She refused food and water, telling her family that corpses had no need for such things. She withdrew from daily life, spending long hours in her room, whispering prayers for the dead. Her daughter, frightened and heartbroken, tried everything: favorite foods, family photos, songs from Lola's youth. But nothing seemed to reach her. Neighbors offered advice, herbs, prayers, visits from the local priest. The family held a special mass, hoping that a blessing might break the spell. But Lola Maria's conviction only deepened. "You must let me go," she pleaded, "so my soul can rest." As the days passed, her body grew weaker. Her family, desperate and exhausted, finally brought her to the city hospital. There, doctors listened to her story, puzzled by the certainty in her eyes. After careful evaluation, they gave her condition a name: Cotard's syndrome, a rare and haunting delusion that convinced its sufferers they were already dead. The hospital was a world apart from the village Lola Maria had always known. The sharp scent of antiseptic, the quiet shuffle of nurses' shoes, the distant beeping of machines, all of it felt strange and cold compared to the warmth of home. Her family kept vigil by her bedside, her daughter holding her hand and whispering prayers, her grandchildren drawing pictures to hang on the wall. Doctors and nurses moved gently around her, speaking in calm, reassuring tones. They ran tests, checked her heart, her blood, her reflexes. Each result came back normal. Her body was alive, even if her mind insisted otherwise. Still, Lola Maria remained unmoved. She refused food and water, turning her face away when nurses brought meals. "It's not for me," she would say softly. "I am no longer among the living." Her family tried everything to comfort her. Her daughter played recordings of church hymns, hoping the familiar melodies would reach her heart. Her son brought flowers from the garden, their scent filling the sterile room with a hint of home. But Lola Maria only shook her head. "You must accept it," she told them. "I am gone." The medical team recognized the depth of her suffering. They explained to the family that Lola Maria was experiencing a rare condition, Cotard syndrome, where the mind becomes convinced of its own death. They began treatment with medication, hoping to ease her depression and break the grip of the delusion. Therapy sessions were gentle, focusing on memories of the past. Childhood games, family celebrations, the taste of fresh mangoes in summer. At first, progress was slow. Lola Maria remained withdrawn, her eyes distant, her voice barely more than a whisper. But her family refused to give up. Each day they brought small comforts, a favorite shawl, a rosary, a photo of her wedding day. They spoke to her as if she were still fully present, their love a steady current in the quiet room. Gradually, small changes began to appear. One morning, Lola Maria accepted a sip of water from her daughter's hand. Another day, she listened quietly as her grandson read her a story. These moments were fragile, easily lost, but they gave her family hope, a sign that the woman they loved was still somewhere behind the veil of silence. The journey was far from over. There were setbacks, days when Lola Maria's conviction returned with full force. But with patience, care, and the gentle persistence of those who loved her, the first threads of connection were beginning to reappear, weaving her slowly back into the world of the living. As the days passed in the hospital, Lola Maria's room became a quiet sanctuary of hope and worry. Her daughter continued her daily visits, bringing the outside world in. Fresh sampaguita blossoms, letters from neighbors, the laughter of grandchildren recorded on an old cell phone. Each offering was a gentle reminder of the life that still waited for her beyond the hospital walls. Therapy sessions became a steady rhythm in Lola Maria's days. The psychiatrist, patient and soft-spoken, encouraged her to talk about her memories, her childhood in the village, the festivals she loved, the way the air smelled after the rain. At first, Lola Maria's answers were faint, her voice barely more than a breath. But slowly, the stories grew longer. She recalled the taste of sweet rice cakes at fiestas, the sound of her mother singing as she cooked, the joy of planting seeds with her own children. Her family clung to these moments, however brief. Each story was a thread, weaving her back into the world of the living, if only for a moment. The medical team celebrated every sign of progress, a smile, a question, a sip of soup. They adjusted her medication, carefully balancing hope with caution. There were setbacks, too. Some mornings, Lola Maria would awaken convinced she was already buried, her body rotting beneath the ground. She would turn away from her family, her eyes clouded with fear and resignation. On those days, her daughter would simply sit by her side, holding her hand and whispering prayers for strength. But the small victories began to add up. Lola Maria started to accept small bites of food, to drink warm tea brought from home. She listened as her grandchildren told her stories from school, their voices bright and full of life. The scent of fresh flowers filled her room, mingling with the soft sounds of distant church bells. The journey was far from over, but the direction had shifted. Lola Maria was no longer drifting further away. She was, slowly and uncertainly, finding her way back. Her family watched with cautious hope, their love a constant anchor as she navigated the long, winding path toward herself. As the weeks passed, the hospital room began to feel less like a place of waiting and more like a space for gentle transformation. Lola Maria's family remained steadfast, visiting daily, their voices weaving familiar melodies through the sterile air. Her daughter brought her small comforts, a favorite shawl, rosary beads worn smooth by years of prayer, the scent of coconut oil from home. There were more good days now. Lola Maria would sometimes join in family prayers, her voice quiet but present. She began to take interest in her grandchildren's stories, asking questions about their schoolwork or laughing softly at their jokes. The nurses noticed her growing appetite. She accepted small portions of rice and broth, and even asked for a slice of mango, savoring the sweet taste with closed eyes. Therapy sessions shifted from the past to the present. The psychiatrist encouraged Lola Maria to notice the world around her, the warmth of sunlight on her hands, the gentle hum of the hospital corridor, the sound of birds outside her window. These grounding moments helped her reconnect with her senses and, little by little, with herself. But the journey was not without setbacks. There were still mornings when Lola Maria woke, convinced she was a ghost. Her body a shell, her soul long gone. On those days, her family simply sat with her, holding her hand, offering silent companionship. They understood now that recovery was not a straight path, but a winding road with moments of doubt and moments of light. The medical team remained patient and supportive, adjusting her treatment as needed and celebrating every sign of progress. The family, too, learned to cherish the small victories, a smile, a question, a shared meal, as proof that Lola Maria was returning to them, one gentle step at a time. And so, in the quiet of her hospital room, surrounded by love and memory, Lola Maria's world slowly expanded. The veil between life and death began to lift, and with it, the possibility of hope grew stronger each day. The rainy season arrived, painting the hospital windows with gentle patterns and filling the air with the scent of wet earth. In her small room, Lola Maria's world continued to grow brighter. She now greeted her family with a smile, her eyes warm and attentive. The laughter of her grandchildren, once a distant echo, now brought a sparkle to her face. Her appetite returned, and she began to ask for favorite dishes: arroz caldo, sweet bananas, fresh coconut water. Each meal shared with her family was a quiet celebration, a sign that she was reclaiming her place among the living. She joined in prayers, her voice growing stronger, and sometimes even sang along to old folk songs, her grandchildren clapping in delight. Therapy and medication continued, but the most powerful medicine was the steady presence of her loved ones. The psychiatrist encouraged her to keep noticing the world around her. The softness of her shawl, the warmth of sunlight on her face, the sound of birds in the morning. These grounding moments became anchors, gently pulling her back from the edge. There were still days of uncertainty, mornings when the old fear crept in, when Lola Maria worried she might slip away again. But now, she faced those moments with resilience, holding her rosary and reminding herself that she was still here, still loved, still needed. When she was finally discharged, the whole family gathered to welcome her home. Neighbors visited with gifts and well wishes, and the house filled with laughter and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Lola Maria walked through her garden, touching the leaves and blossoms, her heart full of gratitude. Her story became one of quiet strength, a reminder that even when the mind wanders to the farthest edges of existence, the bonds of love and community can help guide it home. And as the rain eased and the sun broke through the clouds, Lola Maria found herself once again part of the world. Her presence a gentle echo of hope for all who heard her story. Thank you for joining me on tonight's journey into the unseen corners of the mind. If these stories touched you or helped you see the world a little differently, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss future episodes. I'd love to hear your thoughts, what resonated with you, or how these stories made you feel. If you have a story of your own or a topic you'd like us to explore next, please share it in the comments. Remember, you're not alone. Our community reaches across the world, and every voice matters here. Until next time, take care of yourself and those around you. Wishing you a peaceful night and gentle dreams.